Our client list was Gucci and Vuitton and Chanel and Balenciaga and Moncler and Armani and a bit of a masochist.
So how long ultimately were you CMO for Aritzia?
About 4 years, grew it to about $1 billion revenue. We could have a whole podcast on the failures I've had. But I was 23, didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know much. Sales is something that is quite natural to me. I'm unafraid to go.
I'm going to just jump.
Do it.
And the work you're doing right now is like definitely in the zeitgeist.
How do I connect with culture? Speak not only to our existing consumers, but the consumers of tomorrow.
I love that.
Me too.
That was a really good hot take.
I want to talk about
Yeah.
the big
Too much,
elephant
yeah.
in the room
Right.
that we haven't mentioned at
Yes.
all, which is
Oli, we're so excited to have you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
You have such an interesting background. I know I'm not even going to cover it all, but CMO of Aritzia, founded 2 agencies and a skincare brand. Tell us that journey, like from Wednesday to Aritzia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, I'll do my best. Lots of chapters. A bit of a masochist in many ways. I suppose starting at the beginning, my father was a serial entrepreneur. My mother was a homeopath, Reiki master, shaman, which we joke is very contemporary in Los Angeles in
Very.
2026, but very strange in Cheltenham in the 1980s. But had this sort of interesting influences. And I suppose the path for me was always one of entrepreneurialism, and that was really the only choice. So I had a nice grounding in education-wise in terms of I studied industrial economics with French and Italian, and that was more about economics applied to industry, and it sort of taught the fundamentals of I suppose business. And then I did a brief stint in a hedge fund because most of my contemporaries went into the square mile, and I very quickly felt it wasn't for me, and it just was. Yeah, I think the finance world is fascinating, but I think spending all my day focused on just the business of making money for making money's sake wasn't something that fed my soul. And so I quickly realized there needed to be something else. After a few starting adventures in and around the PR and communications world and sort of getting some exposure to the luxury goods sector, and there's a sort of story there where I started off as an intern in a boutique PR communications agency focused on the jewelry sector, and I knew nothing about PR and comms, nothing about jewelry. But the South African lady who had founded it was incredible and impressive, and I thought, oh, I can learn from you. And 2 years later, found myself running that tiny agency by virtue of having some business common sense and a good work ethic, and we expanded the service offering to be broader than PR and comms, events, experiential, digital consultancy. We expanded the luxury sector. And for me as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, being able to go on my client's dime to the Oscars and Cannes Film Festival and the Monaco Grand Prix and all these amazing places, I thought, oh, this is absolutely ideal. But it was also a crash course in the world of aspirational brand building, which I think sort of set me on that path. So that company was bought by a company called Starworks, a PR consultancy out of New York, which then sold to Vice Media. And I decided not to go with in that acquisition and to launch my own thing. And I was in New York visiting a friend who was one of the founders of a business called an innovation consultancy called Fahrenheit 212, and had a really interesting left brain, right brain model. And I didn't think anyone was doing that kind of consultancy business in London. And more specifically, I sort of thought that the fashion world, which I'd been playing in, didn't understand all of the shifts that were happening in the digital economy and vice versa. And this was 2008. So the world was melting down, the financial world. The bubble had sort of popped and come off. The e-commerce was in its sort of first iteration of getting going. And the fashion industry was terrified of all the changes happening because what had happened was, as you both know, really well, it had gone from being we're going to tell you something and you're going to accept it and here's a statement to suddenly it became a dialogue and there's a sort of two-way conversation. And the fashion and particularly luxury fashion world that's not how they operated. They're like, no, we set the message and people absorb it. So they were very scared and therefore very late to the game. So it felt to me there was a moment in time where they needed to evolve and there wasn't anyone who they felt comfortable trusting to evolve their brand into the digital ecosystem. So that was then, okay, great, here's an opportunity. But I was 23, didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know much. But I had an idea that they needed support here. And I thought, okay, I need some support in really coming at these CEOs with some form of credibility. So I then made a short list of the individuals who I thought were doing the best work. And I went to go and see a chap called Tyler Brûlé, who founded Monocle magazine and has founded many stuff. He had a creative agency called Wing Creative, and he's an incredible entrepreneur. And he offered me a job, and I said, no thanks, I don't fancy a job. I then went to go and see a friend of mine who was a partner at Pentagram, the design firm, and they sort of looked at me and said, you do realize we're Pentagram, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, no, we don't
We
do
don't
this
need
type.
you.
We don't
Yeah.
need. Like, we don't need
23-year-old.
yeah, we don't need you. And so no. And then a friend of mine was a young woman called Emma Greed, who you're probably familiar with. And at the time, Emma was working. She just left a production company and was working with a chap called Jens Greed. Emma wasn't called Emma Greed back then, and Emma said, "Well, you should come and meet my my colleague Jens. He's incredible and is building a sort of group of fashion companies. I think you two should get on, and this sounds like you'd have an interesting conversation." So I went in and met with Jens and Eric, and that was, and then together we created the agency that was called Wednesday.
So who was a part of Wednesday when it was formed?
It was myself, Jens, Eric, and then we had a minority sort of silent partnership with Mother, the advertising agency.
Amazing. Love Mother, interviewed there a long time ago. So
Me
were
too.
you guys were all like mid-20s? This is incredibly young.
I think they are maybe 5 years older than me.
Okay, but still young.
So still young, but they were really smart, really ambitious, and very entrepreneurial.
And did you have clients, or how did you land your first few clients?
Well, so they had a few different companies in and around the fashion ecosystem, and sales is something that is quite natural to me. I'm unafraid to go and have conversations with people and talk about ways in which we could potentially help them. But so they had some inbuilt clients already. I think my first client was, Toast, Lana? I think Toast.
Yeah.
I can't remember how I got
They're
connected.
still around.
They're still around. They do really nice stuff.
Yeah.
And I think they paid us like 30 grand for a website or something like that. It was one of those, you fake it till you make it, and you know a little bit more than the fashion CEOs about digital, and a little bit more than digital CEOs about fashion, and that arbitrage is all you need to get going. And then of course you have one client and two and three, and suddenly it becomes an expertise. But I remember I won them, and I was borrowing some designers from the sister agency Saturday, which was more traditional and print, and we were just about to present our first round of concepts for the first website redesign for them. And I asked the chap who was designing, I said, what aspect ratio is this built in? Because it's something looked a little bit off. And he looked at me and said, A4. And it was just such an example of, we were just like,
different
we're
worlds.
designing it for a piece of A4
Yeah.
paper, not for a website screen. And
If you've ever thought about starting a company, or you're already in it and figuring things out as you go, I wrote Bootstrap Empire for you. It's the real story of how we built Bala from a scrappy side hustle into a global brand, without a traditional playbook or unlimited capital. This book has the lessons and advice I wish I had from day one. Think of it as your mentor in a book format. Bootstrap Empire is out now and available on Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and more. If you're building something from scratch, this one's for you. Visit bootstrap-empire.com to learn more.
I mean, this is also such a throwback for me because I spent my 20s in London, and obviously when I was at Burberry, like, we were bringing everything in-house, and every other fashion brand was going to Wednesday.
Wednesday was such a thing. I
you know,
remember
like, and so
hearing
like
about
being a producer at that time, it was like either you're in-house or you're at Mother or Wednesday. Like
Mother or
you
Wednesday.
we would just like hang out outside the T building, being like, "Are we ever going to be within these walls?" You know.
So you guys made Wednesday cool. very quickly.
It was a real roller coaster. It was really fun. I
Yeah.
mean, and it went really quickly. I mean, our client list was Gucci and Vuitton and Chanel and Balenciaga and Moncler and Armani, and we came up with the idea for Mr. Porter. We were sitting around, three of us, and saying, where do you shop and where do you shop? And there was no good places to shop online for men. And so we said, well, who does the best job for women? And it was Net-a-Porter. And so we said, well, what should they call, if they were to do it, what would they call it? And someone said Mr. Porter, and I went online and said, the URL's available. So I bought the URL.
Wow.
And then we managed to get an appointment, a meeting with Natalie Massenet, and who's the founder of Mr. Porter, and we went in with foam boards to present the vision for Mr. Porter, very digital. And actually, because I didn't buy the URL until we were in that meeting room, because I think it was a premium URL, so it was $2,000 or something. And I was like, well, there's no point buying that if we're not going to do this.
Yeah.
So I had lined up with one of my team a text message ready. If they liked the idea in the meeting, I'd press send in order to buy it, so that then we'd go, oh, by the way, we've already owned the URL.
Genius client.
So now you have to work with us.
The client service was top notch.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it was. And so, but I mean, quite quickly, we sort of had this all bases covered. Balenciaga at the time was I think Nicolas was there, and it was the most prestigious of all of the luxury players at the time from a creativity perspective. So we were working with Balenciaga. We had helped create Mr. Porter, which was the most innovative player in the fashion space at the time, and content and commerce integrated. And then we were doing all of H&M's designer collaborations. So that was on a global basis. And so that was scale and mass and global. So across all these three elements, we were leading the charge. Therefore, as Lana said, it's a case of what they say, 2's competition and 3's a specialty. And so we became the specialists in that category. And so it was a bit of a rocket ship. And I mean, within 4 years, we were north of 100 people in London and New York. And we started off doing very much websites and designing websites and front end build, but then they needed content, then they needed traffic, then you needed cultural relevance, then you needed a brand, and so it sort of became much more than just the digital focus that it started with.
Wow, and managing that many people. So what ended up happening with Wednesday? Like, how long was it around? Did you guys get acquired?
We did. We sold in 2013 to BBDO, who's part of the Omnicom group. I think, myself and Jens and Eric, and of course, I think their entrepreneurial journeys are well documented. We all had other entrepreneurial ambitions. And so we were thinking about those in various forms. We created something incredible at Wednesday. It had a great infrastructure, great systems. We had an amazing CEO in London, a great president in the US. And there was a lot of interest in what we were doing, and it was quite unique. We actually ran 2 processes over those 4 years. The first one, the timing wasn't really right. And then the second time we ran the process, it just sort of felt right to leave it in BBO's hands. So
That's quite quick turnaround. I'm surprised that you were like ready to walk away from your baby.
Yeah, I mean, I think candidly, it was I'd founded it when I was 23. I had no real idea of the success it was going to generate, and I think that the way in which that sort of founding structure was set up, it wasn't conducive to a longer term way of operating, if you put it in that sense, just from an ownership structure.
Yeah, it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
And also at that point, like, agencies started becoming the norm, right? So like, and with digital, it's about who's doing something new, and it's always like the newest seems like the most innovative, and so on and so forth. And companies were bringing it in-house because it wasn't something that was as scary. So I can understand why the move to something else, but you ended up going in-house, which I think is really surprising. Because most people who have started their own thing generally just keep doing that, right? And then after going in-house, let's just touch on that a little bit, because I want to talk about like the big elephant in the room that we haven't mentioned at all, which is your new agency, which does Gap, which is like blowing up right now. So what like what motivated you to go in-house at a brand like Aritzia? And what was that like?
So Aritzia was a client of mine at Wednesday, and I actually remember meeting the founder CEO of Aritzia I was just getting our New York office going, and he left an impression in the first meeting of somebody who was just really, really insightful and smart. And one of the things that he said was, we'd done this incredible presentation. We really wanted to win the business. I wanted to win the business from my New York office because I was growing that and scaling that, and I was sort of thinking about who's in London and who's in New York. And so we were in Mother's office in Hell's Kitchen at that time, and this is before we had our own real estate. So he came in with his team. We did this incredible presentation, and at the end, he turns to me and he says, "I think that was great. I think we're probably going to work together." He's like, "But where do you live?" And I said, "Oh, between London and New York." He goes, "No. Where's your family?" I said, "Well, my family's in London." He goes, "Okay, well, we're going to work with your London office then." And I thought, oh wow, okay, he really understands that how this is going to work, and wanting my involvement, which again, there's very few CEOs sort of would really care to think down to that level of detail to sort of connect that. So I was very impressed by him. Through the process, he invited me onto the board of directors, and so I was 29 at the time, and on the board was this incredibly impressive group of individuals. There was Brian, who's the founder CEO. There was Aldo Benzadoun, who founded Aldo Shoes, multi-billion-dollar shoe business, headquartered in Montreal, amazing entrepreneur. And then there was Berkshire Partners, a private equity group out of Boston, who had made a major investment into Aritzia. And that was it. And so there's all these heavyweight individuals, and then little old me. The reason I was there is they basically had all the fundamentals of business covered: product, real estate, retail operations, finance, infrastructure. What they needed help with was brand and marketing and e-commerce. And that's why they'd hired Wednesday, and that's why they'd hired me. And that's the sort of expertise that they felt that they were lacking, and they were lacking. So I'd been on the board. I'd been to Vancouver headquarters maybe a dozen times, had got a sense for the ecosystem, seen it from the board, seen it from a partnership perspective. And one board meeting, I'd actually been trying to help them find somebody to build the muscle that I was encouraging them to build from a board level. And I was introducing them to CMO friends of mine, and they'd met countless people, but none of them had felt like a right fit for them. And one board meeting, one of the board members turned to me and said, "Is there any way we can convince you to join the team and to do this?" And it just felt like one of those opportunities. I was actually about to continue my entrepreneurial path. JJ and I were about to move to New York, and I was launching a direct-to-consumer swimwear business, which is so random in hindsight.
So interesting.
And I raised some money for it. And I put in place a leader for that, and took the Aritzia path instead. It was one of these things where you go, okay, you put your ego aside in terms of your entrepreneurial ego, and you look at the opportunity from all angles, and you look at it from what you can, the fiscal side of it, you look at it from what you can learn, the opportunity side of it. And it was one of these ones where this is a big business. It was a much smaller business then. It was doing 250 million, or give or take,
which is still
huge.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you go, well, this business it needs exactly what I can bring to the table here. I know the founder CEO is very entrepreneurial. I know the C-suite. I know the board. I know the ambitions, the liquidity ambitions here, because the private equity group had been involved for about 7 years by that time, when the window is typically 5 to 8 years. So you knew there's liquidity on the horizon, and it just felt. And then the opportunity for a big company to help you have a new life experience and move country, which is, as you know, a big thing, felt like a very unique set of circumstances. Yeah. And so we said, okay, and this was, and also you didn't have too much time to hum and haw about it, because JJ was just about to give birth to Ophelia, our daughter, and so it was like one of those, okay, you need to make a decision, yes or no. And so we made the decision, and then when Ophelia was 3 months old, we moved to Vancouver and started that journey as CMO and living in Vancouver and sort of learning everything that came with it. So that was the chapter.
Pretty crazy.
You have the craziest
Yeah.
journey in general. So how long ultimately were you CMO for Aritzia? And, revenue wise, what were they when you left, do you think?
So about 4 years.
Okay.
We grew it to about $1 billion revenue in those 4 years. It was an amazing growth journey. Aritzia is a remarkable company in many, many ways. How structured they think and the ways in which they work and the ways in which they think resonated very much with the ways in which I personally think and work. And so it felt like a very natural fit for me personally, whereas I think other individuals maybe feels like a less natural fit. And it was an incredible group of talented individuals there.
Wow.
So learned a ton. It was in full-on growth mode. And because it was on growth mode, we were investing in all of the things that we felt were part of, and this can apply to some of the things I'm doing now, is Aritzia thinks or thought then very much about the fundamentals that matter to the consumer. And so marketing is actually one of the last things they think about and thought about, because it was really about, okay, if we can offer an incredible quality product at an incredible value proposition, and then we can sell it to people with incredible service in beautifully designed locations, that's going to be hard at scale, and it's going to be something people want. People want beautiful product, people want incredible experiences. Okay, great. Where does marketing fit into that? Well, it doesn't fit into it. But you could talk about retail marketing, and you could talk about investment in content marketing, and you can talk about product and product franchises and product marketing. And so it was really a very sort of core to the core experience. And I still think that a lot of brands today lose sight of the things that matter to the consumers, invest in and focus on some of the stuff that matters less to it. But Aritzia did a very good job of focusing on what mattered, and the scale and the growth came as a result of that.
Yeah, you see that all the time. Like, it's all about reach and demand, and then you receive a product that is terrible. Like, you wash it once, you can't wear it again, or it's not something you're going to repeat on. So essentially, you haven't thought about the fact that you've wasted money on the upfront just because you brought them in the door. Doesn't mean that they're going to stay.
Exactly.
Such an in a world where it's so easy to create and launch a brand. It's like the biggest oversight. Everyone's like, I can just brand it and scale it by throwing money into Meta. Yeah. But that's obviously changing. And I think like we see that with some of the things you're doing now. And I'm going to just jump to Invisible Dynamics. And I think one of the reasons like we really wanted you to come on is obviously you're incredibly impressive, and the work you're doing right now is like definitely in the zeitgeist. But we get a lot of people saying like, we want to understand how someone thinks about brand. And you did there was all of these brands from my perspective that were really losing relevance, right? Like Old Navy, Abercrombie and Fitch, like, and you're just like, okay, you're done. And we see it with department stores, and Gap was there. Like it was pretty much gone in my books. And you've done such an incredible turnaround that I want to talk about like, what motivated you to go back into agency really quick? But then like, how did you start thinking about how you bring this brand back to life? And I know it's not just marketing because I go to their website and everything from the e-commerce pictures appeal to me now, or a Doen collaboration, or, like there's things you've done that are way more thoughtful. So take us through that.
I'll take you through it all.
Did you know that diapers are one of the most common things found in landfills? And most of them are basically plastic that takes over 400 years to break down. Most diapers are actually also bleached. I'm so happy I found the first and only unbleached diapers, Hiro, Hiro. No fragrances, no lotions, no dyes. These are the only thing you should be putting your baby in, truly. And they're so insanely soft, and they use this really cool fungi technology to break down the plastic once they're in landfills. You're insane if you're using any other diapers besides Hiro. Use code Natalie for a special offer, and you can visit herodiapers.com/Natalie.
This chapter that I'm in, again, like all of us, is the current chapters we're in tend to be an aggregate of all of the experiences and misadventures and the successes and failures, and we could have a whole podcast on the failures I've had. which you tend to talk less about, obviously. So when I was thinking about this chapter, we have this vision at Invisible Dynamics, which is, can we be one of the most important creative businesses in the world? And creative business is left brain, right brain. It's obviously a lofty vision. World talks about scale, talks about ambition. When we think of, okay, who are the most important creative businesses around, I look to A24, I look to WME, I look to Universal Music Group. Now, different scales, different ways of creative business. I think the commonalities is they all stand for more than what they started off. A24, yes, they make movies and distribute them, but it's much more than that. They're part of culture.
Yep.
They're selling goods. They're an identity, a badge of identity, all of these things. WME, yes, they look after talent, but they're also in art and live sports and so many other things. Invisible Dynamics, the world we play in is the world of consumer brands. We have a big understanding, a deep understanding from all of this experience that I have and the incredible team has around the pieces on the chessboard that impact that ecosystem. So starts with consumers and really thinking about consumers and understanding consumer motivations and psychologies and what's important to them and psychographics and demographics and geographies and all of the important things there. Second thing is culture and really a deep understanding of consumer culture and popular culture and how, where it is today, where it's going, what it is that gets people talking and clicking and buying and sharing and engaging. And then the third thing is the commercial side of consumer brand building and really understanding the economics of different businesses at different sectors at different scales. So from startup to multi-billion-dollar business, understanding what happens behind the hood, on the board, in the C-suite, down to the store floor, and understanding how those work. So understanding those three things, that means that's our ecosystem into which we play. So how can we play in that? Well, what we primarily do is we help existing aspirational brands be more successful. And if we can help them harness culture to engage consumers and therefore accelerate their growth or turn around their growth, they're going to be happy. And hopefully that means that they'll have a long relationship with us.
Yeah.
And so we call ourselves we don't actually call ourselves an agency. And we've banned that word internally. There's no real perfect vernacular. We call ourselves a growth partner. If we had to label ourselves, we call ourselves a consultancy versus an agency. We do offer things that agencies do offer. But we sort of said, can we, if you are a CEO of one of these brands and you need some help, you actually need to go to 5 or 6 different partners to get the kind of help that you need. You need to go to McKinsey or Bain or Deloitte to be able to get really intelligent, KPI-centric insights and efficiency and from to. The problem with them is they often speak mainly to the CFO and then they don't help with the implementation and they don't typically understand culture and creativity. So, but they're really smart. Then you need to go to people who understand brand fundamentals, so people who understand consumer insights, people who understand brand architecture and positioning, people who understand visual and verbal identity and can help you with your needs in that. You then need to go to people who understand product and designing a product or all of the aspects around product design, so hang tags, labels, presentation, packaging, merchandising. You then need to go to somebody who understands retail and physical space, and whether that be your own stores or whether that be creating experiences or memories which live outside of your own destinations. You then need to go to people who understand e-commerce and digital design in order to sell websites, apps, third party. And then you need to go to your marketing partners, which are your ad agencies or your social partners, your storytellers. And then in order to bring those ideas to life, you have to go to a production house in order to get it produced. And so we said, well, can we do all of that and be that one partner? Sounds like it's more efficient. It's obviously a bit more complex because you need all of those skills. But that was the vision, and that's what we're.
But how do you manage to execute on? There's a reason there's experts in these things. They are very in-depth, thoughtful sections of getting, marketing to somebody and then also getting a product in their hands through the whole flow. Like, how can you go to somebody and say, we're going to do all of those things and we're going to be the best at them?
Yeah, I think we don't do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So we don't do a lot of the nuts and bolts we don't do performance marketing.
Yeah.
We don't do SEO.
Yeah.
We don't do media buy. We don't do PR. We don't do creator. There's lots of things that we don't do. But the outline of what I mentioned, we do, and that was really about the ability to scale specialism. And so it's as simple as that. I mean, we're now 70, 80 people, we'll probably be 100 people in the next couple of months. And it, like you say, it's a little bit like an aggregated group of all of those specialists.
Yeah.
And therefore, if in theory, and if you can hire the best specialists in each of those verticals, you can compete against the best of the best. And I think that's what we do.
So how did you get your first client, Gap? And then I want to talk about, because let's talk a little bit about Gap, but I also want to hear about some of the other clients, like Beyond Yoga. Shout some of the other ones out. How did you get your first client, and then how did you continue to get these like insane, amazing clients?
Gap is a real testament to the vision of the CEO, Mark Breitbard. So we were introduced by mutual friends as Mark had sort of been in place at Gap. He was previously CEO of Banana Republic and had been in the Gap Inc. family for many years. And he'd been in place, I think it was about 2.5 years. And this was what year are we now? So this is 2023, springtime, we got connected. The reason was obviously Aritzia. Everyone was curious around Aritzia's success, and a friend said, well, you should speak to Oli because he was a key part of it. And so we met up, and I had the vision for Invisible Dynamics that I just outlined, and I had a very small team, and I was sort of thinking about the ways in which to get going. And immediately we had a meeting of minds, and he'd been working on the back end of the Gap turnaround in terms of efficiencies and right sizing of store network and all sorts of things for a couple of years, and a lot of the product side of the coin as well, and was now turning his attention to the front end. We had this conversation about there being no silver bullet, about it not just being marketing that was needed, but it being about a 360 brand transformation. And the process that we have at ID, which we have an initiative called 360 Brand Transformation, which is very structured, very methodological. We have a framework called the Invisible Index, which breaks down any consumer business into brand fundamentals, product, retail, e-commerce, and marketing. Has about 200 data points that we take in. We do a lot of qual, a lot of quant, which then analyzes the state of the union from a brand side across all of those data points and the sub-data points. And then it comes back and says, okay, your brand is X out of 10. And here's the Y out of 10, Z out of 10. And it gives a very objective breakdown of your brand, the good, the bad, and the ugly as it stands right now. And we do that in a very collaborative way. So it's not just us coming in and saying, oh, you're this. It's a very collaborative. We listen a lot. We do a lot of research. We back it up with facts and data wherever we can. Of course, there's some stuff which is more subjective and interpretive. But the whole process is very collaborative, because the only way in which to be able to change any organization of any kind is to make sure that you're going along that journey together. So we went on that journey with Mark, with his C-suite, and then what we do is, unlike some of the management consultancies who present a vision in an Excel sheet, what we do is we create something called the Brand North Star, which is a visualization of the cross-channel tactics that we think your brand should become 3 years from now. So essentially what we do is we help CEOs see 3 years into the future. So our words, images, and numbers. If you like that, we then do what we call a brand action roadmap, which is, okay, great, here is what needs to happen investment-wise, the what, the when, the how much, in order to achieve that vision. Of course, you've got to work within the confines of P&L and your respective owners and be very collaborative with those owners. But that then becomes the starting point. So then what we did back then was we then presented that vision to the Gap Inc. board of directors. And the now Gap Inc. CEO, Richard Dixon, was on the board about to come into being CEO, and he understands brand very deeply. And so saw this vision and embraced the vision. And together, him and Mark have really helped to then invest in the necessary changes that were needed. But Lana, to your point, 20 years of people trying to turn around Gap, so many people had tried.
Yeah.
And when I sat down with Mark, I said, lots of smart people have tried, the odds are definitely stacked against us,
Yeah.
but think there's a collaboration that can set up those odds for success. And it's worked quite nicely.
Yeah. And I think you're right though, that it is like it's through looking at every single aspect of the business, because you can't just tap into culture and then you walk into a store and it looks messy and like you can't figure out what you're looking for on the rack, or it's not representative of like what you saw in the ad, right?
Exactly
Like it
right.
has to touch every single element and like it needs to
Exactly.
feel like it looks. And I think now we see like a few brands doing that well, but it's been big, like what
Yeah.
Julia Collier is doing at J. Crew,
Yeah.
and I worked with Julia years ago. But like you can see that these brands have finally understood that it's more than just like doing a cool pop up
Yeah.
with a
Totally.
great partner.
You know, Julia worked for me at Wednesday.
No way. Oh, actually, I didn't know she was at Wednesday before.
Yeah.
I met her when she was working for a New York agency that worked for Nicola Formichetti, because both Mary Media was brought
Yeah.
onto
Yeah,
Diesel.
there we
So
go.
that's how we worked together.
There we go. Amazing. No, Julie's amazing.
Yeah, she's
That's
great.
small world. But
But
no,
yeah.
you're right. And I mean, and our partnership with Gap has been much bigger than the Cat's Eye and Young Miko campaigns that you see, and all the ones that came before that. We've evolved the brands and the sort of fundamentals of it. We've applied that brand evolution across all products and hang tags and labels, and there's been a sort of lot of product branding initiatives that we've led. We've redesigned the website, the app. We've taken that through many iterations, and it's always moving towards a North Star.
Yeah.
We've helped move forward the store of the future, and then sort of really helped put in place some of the infrastructure to take a more social first approach to storytelling.
Can I ask about partnerships a little bit? Because like the Doen one really struck me, because you took what was a very, I mean, it's not luxury price point, right? But it is contemporary price point versus Gap at the time. And I don't think Gap had really hit that moment of cool yet. And you managed to pull off like the perfect collaboration. Like how did that come to be, and how do you convince a brand like Doen to produce lower price point products that compete with their own?
I definitely can't take credit for the Doen one. We were involved in it, but we weren't the impetus for it. I think Mark, as the CEO, loves collaborations.
Yeah.
And he's very good at them, and he sees the power in them. I think what has got so much easier over the years is getting the more aspirational kind of collaboration partners as you start to put in play a higher caliber of creativity, and one leads to a next. We've been highly involved in a number of them, and not all of them. The goal is always how, to your point, how can you have a surprise factor which excites people? And then when you look at it in aggregate, how can you have a diversity of collaboration partner which speaks to different audiences? Because of course you're trying to tap into different aspects of culture and really broaden your
also
your
such
consumer.
a proven model that kind of in fashion that kind of died down, like Uniqlo. Uniqlo used to do this all the time with like big fashion brands, remember? And it was like drops, and everybody would like run into store to try to get like that one thing.
It is interesting, like you say, there's always been a cycle, and then certain brands rise to the top in terms of the way in which they're executing them.
So tell us some of your other clients.
Yes.
Beyond Yoga.
Beyond Yoga, amazing brands. Nancy and Katie there. They are, I mean, I know you're friendly with the original founder. They're now owned by Levi's Group, as you know, and I think they are thinking about the category in a different way, and how can they take the nucleus of what that brand is and was and stood for, and how can they expand that and grow that. And I think that we've sort of put in place a brand platform for them called Seek Beyond, which is really about this sort of ability to look inside yourself and think, be sort of more thoughtful around what you can achieve and how far that you can go. And of course, that has a number of ways in which it can express itself. And so we did a piece of content with Issa Rae, which was a bit more of a sort of manifesto. We've just done a IRL activation with Sophie Tucker, which was up in Franklin Canyon, which was a bit more of sort of a physical manifestation of it. So they've been, I think they've got incredible leadership, and that's exciting. We're doing a lot of great work with Nordstrom. love them. They are. You talk about disruption in and around the retail landscape, and there's been so much disruption and so much closure and the whole Saks drama, but then also Farfetch and multi-brand and My Teresa, and just the sort of the list goes on, whether it be digital only or whether it be physical. Exactly. So lots of turmoil, but fundamentally the value proposition of being able to offer a curated selection of high quality products with incredible customer service is something that we all want. And so Nordstrom is just so uniquely positioned, especially now that they are now private again, in order to be able to take advantage of that at scale. And they have tremendous scale already, but that can, there's much more room for them as well. So, and they're really smart. They have this incredible, rich history and legacy, and so we're sort of collaborating with them to think about how does that evolve for the next chapter of growth. And that's a lot of what we do, whether that be with Nordstrom or with Gap or Cole Haan is another amazing client. It's incredible. I think the oldest shoe company in the US. You have these brands that are big and have been around for a while and have incredible rich histories that maybe are not connecting with culture as powerfully as they once did. And so essentially what we are partnering with them to do is that equation. It's okay, great, you have this incredible company, you've got these leadership who's hungry to accelerate your growth and you have a platform to do it because of your scale and size and sort of how you're structured. Okay, what you're wrestling with is how do I connect with culture in order to help accelerate our revenues, in order to speak not only to our existing consumers but the consumers of tomorrow. And so that's really the sort of role that our partnership takes with many of those clients. Who else are we working with? I was Hoka.
Nike. You had Nike. For a moment.
Nike. We did for a moment. We're now collaborating with Hoka on some really exciting stuff. Athleta, part of the Gap Inc. family. Formula Fig.
Well, yeah,
the best client.
The best client, the only client. So, okay, wait. Yeah, you go. I was just going to ask, we have a lot of people also that listen to this that are on the agency side or building agencies, maybe a lot smaller with not as big clients. But what advice would you give somebody in getting their first 5 clients if they have an agency and maybe they're not going for Aritzia level? Any advice on getting your first few clients?
It's a great question. I feel like I should have a really succinct answer. I think agency businesses are, there's lots of consumer brands, there's lots of everything. There's lots of agencies out there. And it's so easy to start an agency because it's one man, one woman, and computer and your horse, and that's sort of it, and the ability to offer some kind of service. Now, turning a agency-centric, service-centric business, should I say, into a brand, into a something that is sort of renowned in the industry is very different to just getting your first few clients. And so it depends upon how you're thinking about it and what level of scale that you want to play in and around. There's a lot of agencies who do great work, but they do it for a long tail ecosystem of smaller brands. And really how they're thinking about scale is different, and it's because they're needing a lot more clients to achieve the level of scale in which they, just by nature of the economics of it. There's lots of people who need help. So as you both know, as entrepreneurs, at every stage of your journey, you've needed help from all sorts of agency partners. And you're probably better suited than me to sort of say what's good and bad look like. Usually you want people who are smart, have subject matter expertise, are organized, structured, communicative, and can deliver against what they say they're going to in a reliable way. And so it sounds like a pretty low baseline. It's actually obviously doing that is actually harder and less common than you might think. So I mean that's really the fundamentals. It's have a specialism, be great to work with, and then deliver against what it is that you're going to deliver. Now then you need to think about what's the differentiation point between yourself and others. And I think sort of differentiation for an agency, consultancy, service-based thing ultimately boils down to people and values. And then it often then manifests in the work that you see out in the world. So we have brilliant people here. And as we grow, what's amazing is that you get bigger, you can afford more brilliant people. And brilliant people are expensive. But that is your cogs. And so that is where you need to invest. And not only the money you need to invest, but also your time, your attention, the culture that you build and what you can attract. I think probably the thing that I'm the most proud of historically is the cultures that I've helped to build. Like Wednesday, you talk about it was, why did it have the reputation? Because it just of the culture of these brilliant people. And then the fact that Julia is now CMO of J.Crew and so is now CMO here and there and CEO there. Is like this, it spawned this. It was a great platform for amazing people to be able to learn and to be able to grow and then to be able to go on to more brilliant things. And I think that is what we're creating now at ID. Is I think we're creating a platform for brilliant people to come in, to be able to be like a sponge, to be able to learn, but obviously use their talents in a multitude of ways. And I've got no doubt that you're going to see invisible dynamics individuals in positions of leadership all over the industry in years to come.
And how do you think about AI in the mix of things, where like actually people are trying to create leaner teams and people are rethinking about how content is created, and like what's your response to building something that works in a world of AI?
I think it's brilliant. I think that we'd probably have to be 200 people to be doing the work that we're doing now if it wasn't for AI. So I think it's an incredible enabler. I suppose it's a little bit like the Kindle and books. The Kindle is amazing. I have one.
Yeah.
It's better to read in bed at night and not wake your partner up on a Kindle than it is to turn the lights on and read on a book.
Yeah.
But I still have loads of books, and I still buy books. Now I buy less books than I used to, but the book industry hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
And I think that AI is not. We're not going to be in the matrix in a few years from now. There's always going to be a need for human ingenuity and curiosity and creativity. But I think that what it does is it lets the creative industry and all industries be more productive. Now, I think the creative industry is particularly more defensible than others because of the nature of creativity being so amorphous and it arguably being a harder thing for AI to crack.
Yeah, you can't teach taste. You can't teach an AI taste, at least from my experience. And I've signed up for so many of these products that promise an outcome of creative content. And I'm like, this is not the same.
I agree. And I also think that, we're at the start of AI, so it's going to get better. Everything we see is going to improve. And the assumption is that it will if you assume that it's going to be brilliant at everything, so assume it's going to have taste, assume it's going to have this, have that. I do believe that the human layer is just crucially important. We're hardwired. It's a little bit like that notion of why did goggles and specs not take off?
Yeah.
Is because because humans need to be able to see out the side of each side of their
but also face. The output of like 2 + 2 is always 4. The output of taste is always changing, and you need the human layer to tell it that has changed.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think taste, I think curation, I think interpretation, I think nuance. I think you think about consumer brand ecosystem as well, and so it's all about human interaction. And it's whether it be you as a human interacting with my e-commerce site, whether it be you as a human wanting to go somewhere and buy something because it's a nice experience, and that gift wrapping made me feel good, and the intangible aspects of that, and the sort of interactions that you have with people along the way.
Yeah.
That's from a consumer brand side, and then you talk about the internal side of it as well. Is you have these organizations that need to collaborate and work together, and so it's not as if you're just going to put instructions into any kind of agentic engine and just get the answer and trust it.
Yeah.
It's obviously being very disruptive, but I view ID as a disruptor. We're disrupting the consulting space, we're disrupting the storytelling space, we're thinking around brand building through a new lens. So it's often quite nice when you are a disruptor yourself to be able to have the enablement of disruptive tools and things being a little bit thrown upside down is good because it challenges people to think in different ways. And you take Mark as an example. I mean, he's a real pioneer. Most CEOs wouldn't have chosen to work with Invisible Dynamics at that stage.
Yeah.
They would have viewed it as being too high risk. But because he's an innovator and because he saw the vision, he said, great, let's do this. And the results are a testament to his decision in order to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. Most Gap CMOs or CEOs would have chosen like BBDO or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Who are
Do.
all producing the same stuff.
That
Yeah,
was
you-
risky of him. Okay.
Okay.
It's time for hot takes. What's yours?
I think you should build any business that you run as if you are going to sell it, even if you don't intend to sell it. And I think thinking about that from day one forces you to think of organizational structures, infrastructure, financial discipline, rigor, fundamentals in a way which is very conducive to, and then if you want to sell your business at any moment, it's less work because you've already set things up in that manner and scaled it and grown it so that it's easy for somebody to be able to look at your business and ascertain if it's interesting to them or not.
I love that. I think
Yeah.
it's so important to try to build your business where it can run without you.
I think also that it's starting with the mindset that you want this to be something that's going to be attractive to someone down the line, not just yourself. And then you create higher expectations of what the output looks like.
Yeah, agreed. The analogy is that I play a lot of tennis, and a lot of people in business are thinking about the outcome, and it is important to think about the outcome. But okay, if I want this return of serve to go into the far right-hand corner, okay, that's where I want the ball to come. I think about it, and I'm wanting it to go there. But if I actually want it to go there, I don't think about that at all. I'm aware that it's there, and now I have to think about the things that are important. I think about my stance. I think about my body weight. I think about is my arm pulled back? Is my racket high enough? I think about my positioning. I think about the weight transfer. I think about where my hand goes in the direction. And if I think through those things with enough accuracy, the ball goes where I want it to go.
Yeah.
And I think running a business is similar. You have to have an idea of where you want it to go, but then you focus on the fundamentals of amazing team, amazing value proposition, incredible product, incredible service, all of the fundamentals. And then it has a greater likelihood of going where you want it to go.
Yeah.
I love that.
Me too.
That was a really good hot take.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you for having me.